Wait, what?
The
Wait, what's going on here? Did DZ just Is this a re-upload?
the
Did he make it again? The End of Egyptian Gods. What's going on here? Why the remake? Oh, he made a remake. Do you want to react? We're rebooting the series, boys. We're rebooting the series. Okay.
Egyptian gods are three of Yu-Gi-Oh's biggest icons, but sadly, it's no secret that they've struggled at competitive tournaments for pretty much their entire existence. In today's video,
I don't think we've ever seen a competitive top by Egyptian gods, have we?
And also what shortcomings
I'm sure if I watched the first iteration of DZ's video, I'd remember.
And you might recognize that this is a remake of my biggest video ever that I posted.
Yo. You mean to tell me if we play a 3.1 million, if we replay a 3.1 million viewed video on YouTube again, we go again. This is just infinite card printer or money printer.
Posted 5 years ago. I feel
Obelisk
like
frogs? Was that a thing? What year was that?
Mortal Kombat 1s and Call of Duty is allowed to have 2 Modern Warfare 2s. I'm allowed to remake Why Nobody Plays the Egyptian Gods 5 years later. Before we get into the individual issues of each Egyptian god, let's talk about one problem that affects all 3 of them, their summoning condition. While this has become less of an issue with the release of many modern Egyptian god support cards, this still is one of their biggest drawbacks, and for many years it was the #1 thing holding them back. Basically, all of them share the following.
The problem with the Egyptian gods is that they are too easy to out. They're hard to summon, and then when you summon them, they all lose to like a Nightmare Unicorn.
When normal summon, cards and effects cannot be activated, although in the case of Ra, it says other cards and effects because you still need to be able to use its on-summon ability.
In the case of Ra, taste the cock of Ra.
2 of these are protection effects, and that's wonderful. There aren't too many cards that can negate normal summons besides the Solemns, but there are a lot of cards and effects that your opponent might want to activate when a god card is successfully normal summoned. So it's
the
nice
big advantage of the god cards, they can't be TT'd in bottoms, but people haven't played those in like really 10 years.
Remember,
well, okay, Torrential's been played, of course, but
you have to tribute 3
even then you can Torrential your own monster later and then out the Egyptian gods. It's crazy.
Now you might be wondering, what's the difference between tributing 3 monsters for the normal summon of an Egyptian god versus using 3 monsters for a Synchro, Xyz, or Link summon? The one big difference between the Egyptian gods and 3 material extra deck monsters is that you don't have to draw the extra deck monsters. You will never have to worry about trying to draw Trishula when you have 3 monsters on the board. It's
what if we got Link Slifer?
You won't have to worry about drawing it when you don't have 3 monsters.
Huh? Contact Fusion Obelisk?
Those are 2 very real situations that you could find yourself in. Now, before you get mad at me for comparing the Egyptian gods to a card from another era, note that the playable Egyptian gods were released a lot later than people seem to remember. I know that a lot of people...
So, just as a small little like side point here, the only thing that the god cards need to be competitive, I feel, is that you just give them the anime effect. They are just immune to cards, except their own attribute. Divine monsters are unaffected by monsters. I don't know if you make them unaffected by spells and traps as well. I think you probably should, because they're just like the OG Egyptian gods, and that's kind of how they worked in the anime. I think if you just straight up did that, they would be playable. And funnily enough, I don't even think they would be meta. Of course, they can still be kaiju. I'm not saying like, bro, yeah, of course they can still be kaiju. Yeah, chat, like, I'm not saying we should make the Egyptian gods unoutable. Make them Manga Ra, level of broken. Like, for example, Manga Ra, it can be kaiju'd. It's unaffected by anything that is lower divine attribute, which, by the way, there's 3 stages of divine attribucy. There's, like, Ra, who's the most important. So technically, he's unaffected by Obelisk and Slifer. He unaffected by spells and traps, unaffected by monsters, can't be removed from the field, so you can't kaiju it, blah, 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 blah. That's not what I'm saying. Obviously, they should be counterable, Underworld Goddess or something like that. But just making them immune to monster effects for non-divine monsters is just straight up, like, an easy fix to these things.
People, myself included, had the Egyptian gods with the flavor text back in the day, but the first playable Egyptian god released was Obelisk at the very end of 2010, and then in January of 2011, we got the first playable version of the Winged Dragon of Ra. Want to know when Trishula was released? Also in 2011.
Wait, why?
It took until 2012 to get a playable version, so Trishula really was released around the same
Wait, the
era
god cards
as
weren't playable from the beginning of the game?
Now that we've covered some of the shared abilities of the Egyptian gods, let's talk about what makes them unique, starting with the Winged Dragon of Ra. The Winged Dragon of Ra cannot be special summoned. All 3 of the Egyptian gods do have
Unless you ignore the summoning
Ra
condition.
has the worst of the bunch. Several Ra-specific support cards can special summon it by ignoring its summoning conditions, but this definitely hurts Ra.
Did he say that this is the worst one?
Because you can't
Well, maybe at the time it was the worst one.
to bring it back. When this card is normal summon, you can pay life points so that you only have 100 left. This card gains attack and defense equal to the amount of life points paid. Now, I know this effect has confused people in the past, so I do want to make one thing absolutely clear. The can in this effect refers to your choice to activate it, not your choice in how many life points are paid. The effect itself is optional, but if you decide to use it, you're always putting yourself to 100 life points. Ra's last effect is you can pay 1,000 life points, then target one monster on the field, destroy that target. This effect is pretty straightforward, but notably, it's not a once per turn ability. As long as you have the life points to pay, you're allowed to keep activating it over
It's
and
also
over
kind of
again.
useless because if you pay your life points to 100, you're not using that ability.
Can't directly respond to its normal summon, they're still free to use quick effects when there's an open game state after that resolves. Ra is great at dodging cards like Torrential Tribute, but it's powerless against even basic interruptions like Raigeki Break. And I've never been a big fan of the destruction.
Oh, why is he talking about Raigeki Break? Which deck is playing that?
Is fantastic. Having it stuck on a 3 tribute monster is pretty awkward. Not to mention that if you don't pay life points to give Ra attacks that you have life points to pop cards, you're stuck with a 0 attack Ra. At that point, just play Raigeki or Dark Hole. It's worth mentioning though that Konami has thrown quite a lot of
the Ghost Sphere mode
over the last couple of years in an attempt to make it somewhat
I think Immortal Phoenix is the best version of Ra.
Designed to solve some of these
Slime's good.
I'm talking about too. You can make Ra unaffected by card effects, so it's less susceptible to removal. You can give
I've never seen Blaze Cannon.
attack points based on what monster
Okay, this is the one good card, right? Because it lets you tribute one guy or something.
you tributed so that the popping effect isn't attached to a 0 attack monster, and there's a bunch of consistency boosting cards
The
to help
true
you
Sun
settle
God.
combo pieces early on. Sadly, even
Dude,
with
we
all
need
the support that
Slifer
Ra's
support.
gotten over the past 5 years, it hasn't really been able to
Ra's
be
had a lot, we need
successful.
Slifer
It's
support.
still
Slifer's a cool
Unglass
one.
Cannon deck, and Raw Sphere mode is pretty good, but most of the actual Raw combos take too many cards for not enough payoff. Let's take a look at what unique effects Obelisk has though. Once per turn during the end phase, if this card was special summoned, send it to the graveyard. Obelisk and Slifer both share this downside, and while it's not as
We
bad
have
as
Slifer
Ra's,
support?
it's definitely
Okay,
not
correction,
ideal.
we
Neither
need
player can target
good
this card with
Slifer
card
support.
effects. This is without a doubt the best effect on Obelisk. Modern monster cards have a variety of other protection effects, and protection effects in general are a lot more common.
Like, this should just be standard for all divine monsters. Like, that just makes the most sense. They should not be targetable or destructible or affected in any way by non-divine monsters and spells and traps. Like, it's just that simple.
By 2011,
Hazif, Makimi, thank you guys for the primes.
Especially on Obelisk, a 4,000 attack point monster. So if you wanted to play Obelisk, this was the big selling point. Finally, you contribute 2 monsters, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. This card
Go to card crush. What is this ability called?
This flashy anime effect, unfortunately, didn't translate that well to the TCG.
There's English, there's Japanese, there's God to card crush,
monster and then tributing another 2 monsters.
and something in English.
This
the
card that
fate.
directly benefits from this effect being used, but even in that case, it's
Oh, it
still
can't
not
even
worth
attack.
it. The main thing holding Obelisk back is that it just doesn't do enough. It's 4,000 attack and it can't be targeted, but that's about it. That means that its value is entirely dependent on how strong a non-targetable 4,000 attack monster is in that format. And unfortunately for Obelisk, even in that category, it has tough competition. Every time we get a new card like Cliffort Towers or Rival Adagnister, Obelisk looks even worse by comparison. These cards have better summoning conditions, better protection effects, and better on-field abilities. And I think for this reason, Obelisk has really struggled in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Ra might be a lot worse on paper compared to Obelisk, but because it's gotten 10 plus support cards, it's a lot easier to play as an actual deck. That being said, I did want to acknowledge that in the early 2010s, Obelisk did pop up every once in a while.
Well, it only took 10 banlists in the
one-of
LCS
decks
for
or
Ra to
Dragon
become
Ruler decks
playable.
as a one of inside decks. In the Dragon Ruler mirror match, it was a pretty interesting tech option because Dracosack could summon 2 tokens really easily, and then you could tribute the 2 tokens and the Dracosack for Obelisk, and in the mirror it was really hard to deal with because you couldn't use Big Eye or Dracosack to remove it. Obelisk wasn't popular in those formats.
There's
so it
no
wasn't
way.
a standard option for those decks.
People cited Obelisk in the Dragon Mirror.
Mention it. Hopefully Konami throws Obelisk a few more cards in the future.
That's
but
really
until then,
funny.
It's unlikely to perform well at events. Finally, that brings us to
I mean,
Slightly
2013,
Disguised
right? How
Dragon,
did you
which
out
happens
cards
to be my
without
favorite
targeting?
Egyptian God card. This one says once per turn during the end phase, if this card was special summoned, send it to
Which,
the
by the way,
graveyard. This
just
is
want to
the-
say, hot take. I put this in my hot take rule change video. I think every card should target. I don't think there should be non-targeting. Except for, like, AoE abilities, like Dark Hole, Raigeki, obviously. But in terms of, like, Dingirsu, Mirror Jade, those cards should absolutely target. That's my hot take.
the same drawback as Obelisk the Tormentor, and it has the same problem.
So that cards that can be targeted
bring it back for
actually
at least
mean
one turn,
something.
but it won't stick
But then
around
I don't want
forever,
them to
and
overuse
definitely
that.
hurts because it means that you're going to want
'Cause then
to
everything that
tribute
becomes
some stuff
untargetable just
inside
becomes
Dragon
annoying
properly
as
if
hell.
You want to keep it around. Gains 1,000 attack and defense for each card in your hand. 1,000 was pretty much set in stone by the anime, but I think it scales decently well in the TCG. In my mind, Slifer is usually okay as long as it has at least 2,000 attack points, but it's cool that you can boost it to an insane number if you really want to go for an OTK. If a monster is normal or special summoned to your opponent's field in attack position, that That monster loses 2,000 attack, then if its attack has been reduced to
How would you
0
make
as
like a
result,
good Slifer
destroy
deck, by the way?
it. In my
Because
opinion,
the annoying
this
thing
is the
about
best
Slifer is
effect
you need a
on
lot of
any
cards
of
in
the
hand.
Egyptian God cards. It's not
You have to fill up your hand with like crap, like I don't know, Oja Magic discards, add 3 vanillas that just sit there.
But realistically, it's a
Something like that.
against a variety
Thunder
of matchups.
Dragon.
It also got even better with the release of Link monsters because those can't be summoned in defense mode, so they're always going to be destroyed by the Slifer if they have 2,000 or less attack. Perhaps the biggest downside of Slifer is that it has no...
By the way, I didn't realize how badly this card was like nerfed essentially. If a monster is normal or special in attack, you can literally just play around Slifer by just summoning everything in defense mode. That is so... What a joke.
Protection effects. It's
like,
cool against opposing engine cards if your opponent is
that
just
is
throwing
so
a bunch of
stupid.
monsters at it, but it immediately crumbles against virtually any generic spell card.
M-Pen
like
at home.
Yaki,
Like,
Dark
literally
Hole, or
M-Pen at
Crypto
home.
Tactics Talent. Not to mention that nowadays a lot of monster
Farfa!
cards have graveyard effects, which Slifer
Farfa, jump scare!
good against. Another drawback that it has is that many of the combos that summon Slifer take a lot of the cards out of your hand. Both Obelisk and Ra don't really care about you having card advantage, but Slifer demands it if you want to give it attack points. The goal for Slifer players has always been trying to figure out the most consistent way to bring out Slifer while using the least
What is the best
cards,
engine you can have for Slifer hand advantage? Like, I can only really think of like Ojama maybe.
That's seen some experimentation in branded decks, but even with that trap, Slifer still hasn't made any impact at tournaments. The Egyptian God cards are awesome, iconic monsters that all suffer from a few major
Oh yeah, the
drawbacks.
Joker
While
cards
I
are probably
appreciate
really good,
Konami giving
right?
these cards support every so often, I also think it'd be cool to finally give them extra deck monster retrains. One of the biggest reasons that these cards haven't been successful is simply that they're building an
real talk, I don't know if retrains of like such iconic cards is a good idea. I'm not sure. Maybe like a main deck retrain, but if you start making like extra decks like for Ra and Obelisk, I think that's kind of just weird maybe, right? I don't know if I like that.
Entire main deck around Egyptian gods has always been a challenge, but it might be nice to see them get retrains as big extra deck finishers. Maybe that's a little bit too out there though. I'm just kind of wishful thinking here. At the very least,
personally,
like
I think yeah, just buff it, just errata them.
Suck as much.
Literally just errata them.
If you do want to learn more about the Egyptian god supports that has been released, just a few months ago, I made a video covering every single piece of Egyptian god support. Make sure to check that out. I'll link it at the end of this video. I'll see you guys later. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Doug. Heck bye. So in summary, I think that they should retrain them. Sorry, not retrain. I think they should errata them. I think we should have the Egyptian gods have better effects, or you just make it a rule that divine monsters are unaffected by card effects. Just straight up, just divine monsters are unaffected by card effects. There you go. You have to punch over them somehow. And that's it. I think that's how you give them a buff. And even then, that's the funny thing. Even then, they're still not very good.